And good evening. Good evening. Yeah, Shalene, did you not hear about the rapture? Should have been the rapture today, or possibly tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. Don't hold your breath. Anyway, Beats and Types, Shalene, Espresso Mechanic TV, Vaughn, Dreadeye. Good to see you all. Good to see you all. And as expected, oh, DW76, good evening. As Enchanty, good grief, and Soldier, bloody hell, we're all jumping in tonight. As expected, last night's little foray didn't go well with YouTube, did it? No, that's just not suitable for advertisers, so I won't be getting the usual 10 pence or 8 pence per 1,000 views. Only had 1.4k views on the vertical stream anyway. But, you know, that's why I rely on you guys dropping me the odd shekel now and again. Good choice of word there, shekel, perhaps. Right. Let's get on with it. Remember, like, share, subscribe and all that nonsense if you like it. If you don't like it, why are you here? Remember that you can chat. Oh, Mark Andrew Chapman on the vertical stream. Hi Andrew, good to see you. Remember, you can chat as a subscriber to the channel. There is no waiting period. As soon as you subscribe, you can chat. You don't need to pay anything. Everything's free here. I give you my work on a value for value basis. If you don't value it, then don't pay me. Most of you don't. And I thank you for that. It just restores my faith in humanity. I have a pretty low opinion of humanity. But apart from that, let's crack on. Good evening. Tonight we're diving deep into what may be the most politically explosive decision of Keir Starmer's premiership. The formal recognition of Palestine as a state on September the 21st, 2025. Now, most dangerous criminals, when you deal with them, are often the ones who think they are smarter than they really are, who think they can play all sides against the middle, and then they get found out and caught. And tonight we're examining whether our Prime Minister has fallen into that exact trap, attempting a balancing act so precarious it could topple his government and damage Britain's international standing for decades to come. This isn't just another foreign policy announcement. This decision has split communities. It's enraged allies, and it's left many asking, is Starmer a statesman making tough choices, or a politician so desperate to appease different constituencies that he's lost sight of Britain's national interests? And which one I'm favouring. Yeah, Shalini, yeah. So, before we dive in, what's your initial thoughts? What do you think? Was it the right call? Should he have recognised Palestine as a state? It's all for the greater good, says Beats and Tapes, yeah. So, did he do right or did he do wrong? Is it principled leadership or political opportunism? Shalini says no. Let's see where we stand before we examine the evidence. And there's plenty of it. We'll be here for a good hour anyway, I would think. Soldier thought it's right. Oh, that's an interesting take, Soldier. Interesting. I mean, we'll differ on this subject, no doubt, if I was to express my opinion. But remember, I don't support either side here. They're each as bad as each other. But what we're going to concentrate tonight is what we've done and whether it benefits our interests, not some fucking, I'm not going to say it, not some people jumping about in the sand. I don't care about them. What have we done? Have we harmed our interests? Or have we made the morally right choice? Yeah, let's see. So let's start with the facts. September 21st, in a carefully choreographed video statement, Starmer declared, "I state clearly as Prime Minister of this great country that the United Kingdom formally recognises the State of Palestine." But this wasn't a sudden decision, was it? Back in July 2025, Starmer had set Israel a series of conditions. Agree to a ceasefire in Gaza, commit to a long-term peace deal leading to a two-state solution, and halt actions undermining such a deal, including settlement expansion in the West Bank. And let's be fair, the Israelis have been pushing it since they got the place. You know, what started off as a relatively small country now consumes most of it. The ultimatum was clear: meet these conditions or Britain would recognise Palestine. Israel didn't comply, so Starmer pulled the trigger. Straightforward. But here's the first red flag in the investigation: the timing. This announcement came just after a visit from President Trump, who publicly stated he disagreed with Starmer on this issue. And it also coincides perfectly with the UN General Assembly, where Britain joined Canada, Australia and Portugal in a coordinated diplomatic manoeuvre. Now, the USA is never going to agree to this because, well, we know why. So internal Labour pressure was immense on Starmer. Over 130 Labour MPs had signed a letter demanding immediate Palestinian recognition. But that's only a third of his MPs. But why? Because during the 2024 election, pro-Palestinian independent candidates had actually won seats that Labour should have won. And this created an electoral vulnerability Starmer can't ignore. Now, it might seem that that's a ridiculous statement when you think about the amount of seats that Labour did win. But they're never going to win that again. Not after the start of this performance. So Mark says he enjoyed watching Trump ripping through the UN earlier. I haven't seen that yet, but it sounds interesting. I'll have a look at that after this. So this raises our first critical question. Was this decision driven by principle, or by the simple political calculation that Starmer needed to shore up his left flank before Labour's party conference? I know where I sit. Where do you sit? I don't think this is a principled decision by any stretch of the imagination, and we'll go on to show why that it's probably not a principled decision. So let's examine the domestic response. Soldier, I'm far right, but a little bit left. A bit like myself, mate. A bit like myself. Right, the numbers don't lie. A Telegraph poll published just before the announcement revealed that nearly 9 out of 10 Britons opposed recognising a Palestinian state without conditions, with 51% specifically rejecting recognition while Hamas remains in power and holds hostages. So let's think about that for a moment. In a democracy, the Prime Minister just made a decision that 90% of the public oppose. Okay, you say it's a poll, but it's going to be in the ballpark. You know, even if it's 80%, it's still an incredible amount of the voting public that oppose that decision that's just been made. So is that leadership? Political suicide? Or breathtaking arrogance? A good question, Shalini. Should it not have been discussed in the House? Maybe even put to a referendum? Why not? What's wrong with direct democracy? Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, didn't mince her words, calling the recognition a reward for terrorism. But it wasn't just partisan politics. Britain's chief rabbi, Sir Ephraim Mirvis, urged the government to halt the move, pointing out that recognition wasn't even conditioned on the release of the 48 hostages still held by Hamas. Still got 48 people. And perhaps most damning was the last-minute pleas from families of hostages held by Hamas, who warned that recognition would make it harder to secure their loved ones' release. Starmer ignored them. Now, let me be clear. These aren't political opponents. These are British families whose relatives are suffering in Hamas tunnels, begging their own government not to reward their captors. And Starmer said no. And this is where the fence-sitting criticism really starts to bite. In his statement, Starmer tried to have it both ways, saying this solution is not a reward for Hamas because it means Hamas can have no future, no role in government, no role in security. But Hamas, the group, welcomed the decision, calling for increased punitive actions against Israel. Now, if you're trying not to reward Hamas and Hamas is celebrating your decision, you've pretty much failed fucking spectacularly, haven't you? I believe she is, Mrs. Starmer, or she has roots in Ashkenazi Judaism. So, crucial point in the investigation. When 90% of the public opposes a decision but the PM goes ahead anyway, is that principled leadership? Or justifying the populism? Or is it a dangerous disconnect from democratic accountability? What do you think your take is? Ask the people, maybe, says Beats and Tapes. Oh no, the PM knows what's best for everybody. Yeah, well, that does appear to be the case. He's carrying on regardless. It's not on. Yeah, he pretty much is, to be fair. The international response has been swift, brutal, and potentially catastrophic for Britain's global relationships. Netanyahu, as always, is furious. Immediate and scalding. I have a clear message to those leaders who recognise a Palestine state after the horrific massacre of October 7. You're giving a huge reward to terrorism. But Netanyahu didn't stop there. He declared that a Palestinian state will not happen west of the Jordan River. And suggested that Israel would fight this global push as an existential threat. Has Starmer just made it more likely that there'll be more fighting in Israel? Perhaps more concerning is a growing rift with our closest ally. I mean, Trump was just here. Literally just here. He had dinner with him on Friday, was it? And at that dinner, he publicly disagreed with Starmer's decision. This puts Britain in the extraordinary position of breaking with American policy on one of the most sensitive geopolitical issues of our time. If you lose the trust of your most important partner, if you lose the trust of your colleagues when you're working as a team, operations become infinitely more dangerous. Britain may just have done exactly that on the world stage. Starmer's defenders argue that by moving in concert with Canada, Australia and Portugal, Britain showed international leadership. But here's the question. Did Britain lead this coalition, or did Starmer follow the others to provide political cover? The evidence suggests the latter. France's Macron was already preparing to recognise Palestine and did so today. Other nations were moving regardless of Britain's position. This looks less like leadership and more like jumping on a bandwagon. Starmer couldn't argue with a 10-year-old, says Shanty. That's cool. I like that. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper has already had to warn Israel not to annex parts of the West Bank in retaliation. Think about this. We've made a decision that has already prompted our ally to consider actions that would further destabilise the region. The Israeli response has been one of genuine fury, with many Israelis seeing this as a betrayal by a historic ally. Some Israeli officials have suggested this proves that international isolation stems from Muslim minorities in the West rather than Israeli actions. It's maybe a bit of both, to be fair. But it's a dangerous narrative that could further poison relationships. Shall we follow the money? We like to follow the money, don't we? So, actually more political benefits, isn't it? Who actually gains from Britain's recognition of Palestine? Well, Hamas has welcomed the decision and called for, as we said, increased punitive actions against Israel, demanding the international community sever ties with what they call a rogue entity. But if you're Hamas sitting in tunnels under Gaza with hostages, and major Western nations start recognising your political objectives, while you're still holding those hostages, where's your incentive to even think about negotiation? You've just been handed a massive diplomatic victory without giving up anything. And, you know, in peace negotiation, you never give up something without getting something back. You don't get a pizza unless you give something back. It reminds me of the 5th of May, that time when the Iranian embassy was rocked by explosions as the SAS went in and wiped out 5 of 6 terrorists that had taken 26 hostages. The PM at that point was Margaret Thatcher, quite famously has said on a number of occasions that 1, she was not for turning, and 2, we do not and will not and never will negotiate with terrorists. And we haven't, to be fair here. We've just given in. That's what we've done. We've not even attempted to negotiate release of any additional hostages. We just gave in. We negotiated with our ally, who held to their guns, and we pulled the trigger. Who are we actually allies with? Good question. So, what about the families of the hostages that explicitly warned that recognition would undermine negotiations for their release? What about them? Starmer proceeded anyway. You just, as I've said, you never give criminals what they want while they're still holding victims. It removes any incentive for them to release hostages. Starmer broke the fundamental rule of crisis negotiation on a global scale. Starmer claims this recognition advances a two-state solution. How exactly does rewarding Hamas while they hold hostages and refuse to renounce terrorism advance peace? I don't get that. Now, over 140 nations have already recognised Palestine. Has this massive international recognition created peace? And it's not like, they haven't been recognised for a while. Has it moderated Hamas's actions? Has it led to this two-state solution? And unfortunately, the answer to all these questions is a resounding no. It hasn't. So who's the biggest winner? I mean, is it the Palestinian people? I don't think so. Not at the moment. In fact, it might bring down more terror on them, more hardship, more death. Is it Hamas and other terror groups? You've got to look at it and say, well, they're not celebrating for nothing. Is it Starmer's domestic political position? He's certainly not enamouring himself anymore with the popular vote, is he? I mean, Labour is on a landslide in the popularity stakes. Or does nobody benefit? Will it backfire on everybody? Don't know. It might. Beats and tapes. It's all for the greater good. Of course it is, Beats. Of course it is. So now we get to the fence-sitting analysis, because this is effectively what he's doing. Is Starmer guilty of the most dangerous political sin, trying to please everyone and satisfying absolutely nobody? So let's look at the constituencies Starmer's trying to appease. Labour's left wing. 130 Labour MPs demanded Palestine recognition. Muslim voters. Pro-Palestine independence had won Labour seats in 2024, even though Labour got a massive landslide. International partners, coordinating with Canada, Australia and Portugal, France Today. The Jewish community, emphasising Israeli security and condemning Hamas. And remember, I don't know what he's been sending our military aircraft down there to do, because he can't refuel Israeli fighters, but that's another thing. But we have been doing something down there with our military. The Americans trying to maintain the special relationship despite completely disagreeing and going against their policies. And the hostage families. And he's somehow trying to claim that this actually helps their cause. But this is classic fence-sitting. The attempt to craft a position that gives everyone something while offending no one. But as we have seen, it's a spectacular failure, much like these attempts nearly always are. It's just crazy to try that. Starmer's statement is full of contradictions that reveal this fence-sitting strategy. He recognises Palestine while calling Hamas terrorists. He claims this isn't rewarding Hamas, while Hamas celebrates the decision. He emphasises Israeli security while taking an action that enrages Israel. He talks about peace while ignoring hostage families' warning. That Fabian magazine, The New Statesman, noted that this follows a pattern. A Prime Minister who often found himself on the wrong side of his party in his first year over winter fuel payments, welfare cuts, and his Island of Strangers speech. Remember that one? And he eventually U-turned on all three. So is he determined not to do so again? This is not principled leadership. It's reactive politics. Starmer's been buffeted from crisis to crisis, and this decision looks like another vain attempt to buy peace with his own party rather than pursue Britain's national interests. He doesn't care about you and me. But here's a fundamental problem with fence-sitting on issues like this. When you try to balance between two irreconcilable positions, You end up satisfying neither side while creating new enemies. Now, pro-Palestinian activists will never be satisfied until Britain completely abandons support for Israel. Pro-Israeli voices see this as a betrayal that undermines a democratic ally. The general public sees a leader who ignores their views and rewards terrorism. International allies question Britain's reliability and judgment. We're not seen as a reliable partner anymore, are we? So, let's look at the ramifications. Let's examine the full spectrum of consequences from Starmer's Palestine recognition, because the ripple effects are far more extensive and dangerous than initially apparent. Within 24 hours of Britain's announcement, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta and Monaco followed suit, creating what appears to be a coordinated European push. But this isn't European unity, this is European fracture. Italy immediately declared that recognising Palestine might be counterproductive, while Germany and the Netherlands remain firmly opposed. This creates a fundamental split within the EU and one of the most sensitive foreign policy issues of our time. And here's what's particularly alarming. Multiple NATO members, including the UK, Canada, Portugal, France, Norway, Spain and Slovenia, have now recognised Palestine. So this puts a Western military alliance in an impossible position. How does NATO coordinate Middle Eastern strategy when half its members have taken a position that the other half, led by the United States, fundamentally opposes? We're witnessing the potential fracturing of Western unity at precisely the moment when global threats demand maximum cohesion. You know, Xi and Putin have got to be sitting, just sitting like this. I'm sure they're sitting back with a fine liqueur. This is going well. The West is imploding. The United Arab Emirates, a key Abraham Accord signatory, has warned that Israel West Bank annexation, Israel's threatened response to these recognitions, would undermine the entire normalisation framework. Britain's recognition may have inadvertently triggered a chain reaction that destroys the most successful Middle East peace initiative in decades. And to be fair, the Middle East has generally been a lot more peaceful than it has been for a long, long time. President Trump's public disagreement with Starmer during his UK visit represents an unprecedented strain in the special relationship. Think about this. The US president felt compelled to publicly contradict his closest ally on their own soil about a major foreign policy decision. Britain and America share the world's most intimate intelligence partnership. Probably too intimate. When you fundamentally disagree on who deserves statehood in the world's most volatile region, how does the intelligence cooperation continue? US officials are already questioning whether European allies can be trusted with sensitive Middle Eastern intelligence if they're pursuing policies that Washington believe reward terrorism. UK's decision puts at risk decades of defence cooperation on everything from missile defence systems to cyber warfare capabilities. When allies can't agree on basic principles about terrorism and statehood, deeper military cooperation becomes problematic. So, just weeks before Starmer's announcement, reports revealed the Ministry of Defence was close to awarding a £2 billion contract to Elbit Systems in the UK to train 60,000 British soldiers annually. I don't know where we're going to get 60,000 British soldiers annually. But Elbit is Israel's largest private arms manufacturer and primary supplier to the Israeli military. This contract would make Elbit Britain's strategic training partner for the army, essentially putting Israeli defence technology at the heart of British military training. That deal is now in serious jeopardy. Britain's already suspended 30 of 350 arms export licences to Israel, but maintained the remaining 320. Post-recognition, pressure is mounting for a complete arms embargo. Labour MPs are already demanding an end to all defence cooperation. And here's the technical nightmare as well. Britain actually builds components for F-35 fighter jets that Israel uses extensively in Gaza. Even with arms suspensions, UK components continue flowing to Israel F-35s through a global spares pool programme. So post-recognition, this becomes politically unsustainable. How do you recognise a Palestine state while simultaneously providing the technology for the aircraft bombing Palestinian territories? In August 2025, Britain barred Israeli government officials from the Defence and Security Equipment International Arms Fair, even though Israeli companies were still allowed to exhibit. This was already straining defence relationships before the Palestinian recognition. Now, with full Palestinian recognition, the entire framework of UK-Israeli defence cooperation is collapsing. Israeli officials are asking why they should share intelligence or coordinate security operations with a country that has legitimised their enemy's political objectives. And don't think that being cut off from Israeli intelligence is a good thing. Because Israel provides Britain with crucial intelligence on Middle Eastern threats, terrorism networks, and cyber warfare capabilities. Israeli officials are now questioning whether to continue sharing sensitive information with a government that has rewarded what they see as terrorism. And this intelligence cooperation has already prevented terrorist attacks on British soil. Its loss could literally cost British lives. Israeli defence companies have invested billions in UK partnerships, particularly in drone technology, missile defence systems and cyber security. Post-recognition, these partnerships face an uncertain future. The Watchkeeper drone programme, based on Israeli Hermes technology, exemplifies the deep integration that's now at risk. Britain would lose access to some of the world's most advanced battle-tested military technology. So soldiers not impressed, but you know what, mate? It's ordinary people that are going to be affected. It's ordinary people that are going to lose their jobs. It's ordinary people that are going to lose their houses. You know, just ordinary people, regardless of their politics. And this Israeli technology is endemic in the UK. I mean, nearly all of Scotland's CCTV is run by Israeli tech. Most of your firewalls are checkpoint. That's all Israeli tech. I mean, it might be a good thing to get rid of it, but you're going to suffer because you're going to make yourself very vulnerable while you change over. And if you're not getting Israeli intelligence, which is widely known to be some of the best in the world, then you are leaving your country vulnerable to opportunistic attack. So NATO now finds an impossible coordination challenge. How do you plan Middle Eastern operations when core members have fundamentally different positions on Palestinian statehood? When Britain, France, Canada and other NATO members recognise Palestine, but the United States and other key allies don't, every Middle Eastern decision becomes a potential alliance crisis. Here's a hypothetical nightmare. If Israel responds to Palestinian state recognition by taking military action that threatens NATO member interests, what happens? Do NATO members who recognise Palestine have different obligations than those that don't? So we're creating scenarios where NATO members could have conflicting legal and political obligations in any Middle Eastern crisis. And then we've got Turkey, already a problematic NATO ally, will likely use European Palestinian recognition to pressure the alliance on its own Middle Eastern objectives. This gives Erdogan additional leverage to pursue policies that other NATO members oppose. Every terrorist organisation worldwide is now studying Hamas's playbook, because they take hostages, commit atrocities, refuse negotiation, and major Western powers will eventually reward you with political recognition. That's what's happened here. That's just the fact. So, is this going to happen more often? Are people going to be taken as hostage? This is going to have an impact on tourism in certain areas of the world. Other separatist movements and terrorist groups are referencing the Hamas model as proof that Western resolve can be broken through sustained violence and intransigence. And then we have Beijing and Moscow. Beijing and Moscow are watching Western unity fracture over Palestinian recognition. They are learning that coordinated pressure on humanitarian issues can split NATO and damage US leadership of the Western alliance. They expect China to exploit European-American splits over human rights issues, using Palestine recognition as a precedent for why European nations should distance themselves from US positions on Taiwan, Xinjiang, or Hong Kong. And with European powers breaking from American positions on fundamental sovereignty questions, the UN Security Council coordination becomes even more difficult. How do permanent members coordinate when they can't agree on basic statehood principles? Is it not the case that the US has rescinded all Palestinian visas, so no one in Palestine can actually go to the UN? I don't think that's right. I didn't think it was right before Palestine was recognised as a state by the UK. But that's the US position as it currently stands. So by recognising Palestine without Palestinian concessions, Britain may have actually made a two-state solution less likely. Why would Palestinians now negotiate with Israel when major powers are giving them statehood without requiring them to make peace? Similarly, why would Israelis trust international mediation when the same powers recognising Palestine are simultaneously calling them genocidal? With 90% of our public opposition ignored, Starmer has established a dangerous precedent. Major foreign policy decisions can be made without democratic consultation or accountability. This isn't about expertise overriding public opinion on technical issues. This is about fundamental national values and international relationships where public sentiment should matter. Starmer's made this announcement unilaterally without parliamentary debate or vote. And for a decision this consequential, with this level of public opposition, the bypassing of democratic scrutiny is constitutionally problematic, is it not? Seems a rather big statement to make, saying the country recognises a state when the country has indicated it does nothing of the sort. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch's framing of this as rewarding terrorism is already gaining traction. 90% public opposition it was going to. Labour may have handed the Conservatives a weapon that could certainly influence, if not define, the next election campaign. The Queen wouldn't have done anything, Mark. The royalty shouldn't be involved in politics. They are just a figurehead, mate. You either have a democracy or you don't. The royalty's just there as a figurehead. They wouldn't have made a difference. So we've examined ramifications across multiple dimensions here. Do you think what will prove the most damaging to Britain's long-term interests? Fracturing of NATO? Breakdown of UK-Israeli defence cooperation? Precedent for ignoring public opinion on major decisions? Well, that certainly seems to be a pattern, shall we say. The damage to the special relationship with America? Or the encouragement this gives to terrorist groups globally? That one worries me a little bit. I think we may see a lot more. We may see a lot more in that sphere. So the evidence does appear to be overwhelming. Starmer's Palestine recognition isn't just a controversial foreign policy decision, it's a strategic catastrophe that damages multiple vital British interests simultaneously, from fractured European relationships to collapsed defence cooperation, from damaged intelligence sharing to constitutional precedent. The decision creates more problems than it solves while satisfying virtually no one. Just soldier. Sorry, mate. But this is what happens when you sit on the fence. Because it's that extreme that you've toppled the fence entirely, bringing everything on both sides crashing down with it. Yeah, that's true, Shalini. So let's project forward and see what we think this decision might mean for Britain's future. So the polling is catastrophic. If it's to be believed, then it's as believable as any poll ever is. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But with 90% public opposition and specific concerns about rewarding terrorism, Starmer has handed his opponents a gift that will keep giving. He's not getting away from this one. Conservative leader Badenoch's already bandying about reward for terrorism framing, and it's gaining traction. Starmer's ratings are not good, Julian, you're correct. More concerning is a precedent for ignoring public opinion on fundamental issues. The Prime Minister can disregard 90% public opposition on foreign policy. What's to stop similar decisions on domestic issues? 52% against digital ID. Oh, it's only 52%. Not going to make any difference to me. I'll just go ahead. You can see his mind ticking over. 90% against me? Damn, doing it anyway. Damn the consequences. And we've seen Israel's response today. They will not travel to countries that do not that recognise Palestine. They won't do business with them. I mean, the rift with Israel is potentially permanent. Israeli officials are questioning whether Britain can be trusted as a security partner, and I think they're right to do so, especially with this government in post, because it doesn't appear to have British interests at its heart. Given Israel's advanced intelligence capabilities, as I've said, and its role as a democratic ally in a volatile region, it represents a significant strategic loss. And the disagreement with the US is equally problematic. At a time when Western unity is crucial for addressing global challenges, Britain has chosen to break with its most important ally on a core issue. Who are we standing with now? Waifs and fucking strays. We're pumping money into Ukraine, and we've recognised effectively a failed state that's on the brink of being annihilated. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, because it's far from it. Well, that's the thing, Mark. He is in power and he knows nothing can be done to stop him unless his party turns against him. So perhaps most tragically, the decision may well have a prolonged suffering on the hostages and their families. I mean, that's what, 2 years? Is that 2 years? 2 years now? By giving Hamas a diplomatic victory while they hold captives, Britain has reduced Hamas's incentive to negotiate their release. Why would they? Why would they? Families of hostages explicitly warned this would happen, and Starmer ignored them. If even one hostage dies now because Hamas feels less pressure to negotiate, that blood's on Starmer's hands. And Israel will not be slow to tell us. Globally now, terrorist organisations are watching, and you know who and where most of these terrorist organisations are. And as we found out last night, they live among us. The wolves are in the herd. Britain's decision sends a message that Western democracies can be pressured into making political concessions through violence and hostage-taking. Thatcher's Britain is no more. We are not a strong nation. We are not a principled nation anymore. This could certainly encourage similar tactics elsewhere, as groups see that Britain's approach rewards intransigence rather than negotiation. Just take what you can get, hang on to it as long as you can, and eventually the West will fold. And some aren't. You know, the Netherlands, Germany and Italy are still standing strong by their principles. And I'm no great fan of any of these countries, really. And it's strange that the Axis, the ones holding out for Europe. So, the trade balance with Israel was something like 2 billion. And I think we'd do about 500 million with Palestine. So if we lose our trading with Israel, it'll hurt us more than it'll hurt them. Israel is a major technology and defence partner for Britain. The relationship damage could affect trade, investment and, crucially, security cooperation at a time when both nations face serious threats. Do not underestimate the potential threat that we could now face as a result of this. What could Starmer have done? What could he have done different? What alternative approaches might have been available that wouldn't have created these problems? Could he have maintained these July conditions on Israel, but made them more specific and verifiable? Could he do any worse, says Mark? Well, probably not at this point, mate, no. Could he have made Palestine recognition contingent on Hamas renouncing terrorism? Recognition tied to actual progress and hostage releases? Phased recognition based on concrete steps towards two-state negotiations? That would have maintained pressure on all parties while avoiding the appearance of rewarding terrorism. Maybe his statement that he made to Israel in July was rash. He probably felt it didn't leave him any back door. Sure, he's no stranger to back doors. So rather than following the other nations, Britain could have led a genuine international initiative that included the United States, creating unified Western pressure for peace rather than division. Given the massive public opposition, Starmer could have brought this decision to Parliament, allowing democratic debate and accountability. Instead, he made a unilateral announcement that bypassed democratic scrutiny. Who do you think he is? President signing executive orders? Not how we work. I think this will be his undoing. Perhaps most importantly, Starmer could have waited. With the hostages still held and Hamas still in power, there was no urgent need for recognition that couldn't have waited for actual progress. Why rush? Why rush when the other side aren't? All you've done is make yourself look stupid. Britain could have maintained its position as an honest broker working behind the scenes to advance peace without taking dramatic public stances that pleased no one and satisfied neither side. So, unfortunately, I've got to come to the point that we have a conclusion to reach. And after we analyse these motivations, consequences, and the patterns, what have we? The case for the strategic masterstroke. The defence would argue that Starmer kept a manifesto promise. Is that his first one he's kept? He acted in concert with allies, not alone. Okay, he jumped on a bandwagon. He maintained Britain's traditional support for a two-state solution. That's fine. Nobody's arguing against that. He faced down domestic political pressure to delay. But the evidence, the case for the catastrophic blunder is, in my view, overwhelming. He's ignored public opinion completely. 90% opposition dismissed totally without any consideration. He's alienated his allies. Israel's enraged. America's concerned. Relationships are damaged. Badly damaged. He has rewarded terrorism. Hamas is celebrating while they're still holding hostages with no concessions whatsoever. The peace prospects in the region are now damaged. There's reduced incentive for both sides to negotiate. And following on from that first one, democratic accountability has been abandoned. He made a major decision without parliamentary debate. Starmer's pattern is clear. Reactive decision-making based on internal party pressure rather than national interest. This isn't leadership. It's political survival masquerading as principle. On the central question, the evidence is conclusive. Starmer tried to craft a position that recognised Palestine, satisfying the left, condemned Hamas, satisfying moderates, emphasised Israeli security, satisfying allies, claimed to advance peace, satisfying internationalists. The result? He satisfied none of these constituencies while creating new enemies and problems. Well, that's a good point, Mark. Maybe we have missed the trick. Less peace equals more arms sales. But how's he going to frame that if he tries to sell more arms to Israel after recognising Palestine as a state? He's backed himself into a corner here. This isn't just fence sitting. This is world-class fence sitting. This is dangerous, extreme fence sitting. When you try and balance between terrorism and democracy, between hostage takers and their victims, between 90% of your public and vocal minorities, you're not showing nuance. You are showing moral confusion. As we said at the start, the most dangerous criminals are often the ones who thought they could manipulate everyone. They thought they were cleverer than anyone else. And the most dangerous politicians are those that think they can do the same thing with international relations and democratic accountability. Starmer isn't big. He isn't clever enough. He's played a dangerous game, and in my view, he's losing on all fronts. This is an epic fail of gargantuan proportions. Just my view. Yeah, I don't think anyone's telling Starmer what to do. This is in nobody's interest. Nobody's interest what's happened today or yesterday. It's just a complete mess. There we go. So, there we are. I think this could be a defining moment in Starmer's career and his PMship. The evidence does point to a Prime Minister so concerned with managing different constituencies that he's lost sight of Britain's national interests and democratic principles. Fence sitting in politics isn't always wrong, but when you're balancing between terrorism and democracy, between hostage takers and their victims, between 90% of your public and vocal minorities, you're not showing sophisticated leadership, you're showing dangerous moral relativism. I'd rather you didn't put that on the chat, soldier. Could you either remove it or one of the others? That's not a good word for YouTube. I know we're supposed to be adults here, but we've got to play in their sandbox, mate. Starmer's attempted the most dangerous act in politics, trying to be all things to all people on an issue where moral clarity is essential. The result has been a decision that pleases no one. It satisfies everyone's critics and potentially makes the world more dangerous. It's not principled leadership. Political cowardice dressed as a diplomatic sophistication. And as we've seen tonight, the price of that cowardice is measured in damaged allegiances. Encouraged terrorism, prolonged suffering, democratic accountability abandoned. I mean, we saw last night as we went through everything. These people are among us. So you're going to unsubscribe. Hey mate, it's up to you. It's not a problem. This has been, in my view, a balanced look at what's occurred. not going for either side. But what Starmer's done has completely damaged British interests. And as I stated at the beginning, it's the what did I say at the beginning? Oh, good grief! Now I'm losing it. Well, I'm a student of the world, Stabalon on the vertical chat. What background do you have in a relevant field to speak on this? What field would you say was relevant in politics? You tell me. Starmer has now rewarded Hamas, says Nigel Street. Yeah, you are right, Nigel. Absolutely. Yes, I know it's a truth soldier, but you can't use that word, mate. That's the problem. It's just one of these things. That's a YouTube thing. We're supposed to be adults, but we can't talk like adults. I mean, look at last night. This one will go the same way because we used the bad word that starts with terror, you know? You can't say these things and still be in YouTube's good books. It's crazy. It's absolutely, I mean, the whole thing's crazy, and the thing is, you say go to Rumble, but then again, no views whatsoever. Nobody watches it. Well, when you say when Sabalon's asking my credentials, well, my credentials are, you know, I'm well travelled. I've had nearly 30 years working in the police services. I've worked in local authorities. I've worked with multinational corporations. Got 2 degrees. One of them's a master's. So, then I know how to do research. So, I think that's the credentials I've got. I've been digging into this stuff for 5 years now on this channel. I don't think I'm an expert breezing tapes. By no means am I an expert. But I think I've got a critical mind and I'm perfectly entitled to use it, I think. Well, my first degree's in basically economics, political science, and psychology, and my master's is in IT. Right, moving on. Enough about me. So, what do you think? I think we're nearly done. Nigel Street says, did Iran feed Palestine? No, and see, this is the problem because I think it's very difficult to talk about Palestine without people getting passionate. But the problem is that the rest of the Arab world doesn't like them. And that's quite obvious from the fact that how many refugees have any of the countries around them taken? And it's very, very few. They've always been seen as the troublemakers of the region. They've always been seen as the problemers, the problem makers, the thieves. The region just doesn't like them at all. And in some respects, when you see people like Saudi Arabia kowtowing or cozying up with Israel, even though what's going on in Gaza is going on, you know, then you've got to think, well, why does the rest of the Arab nation behave like this? Because they only seem to have two. They only seem to. You want to see our CV? Yeah. Why does Palestine only seem to have two friends? Basically, Iran or Yemen. I've never been to Dubai, Nigel, so I couldn't comment on it. I don't know what their way of life's like. I've spent a lot of time in the Far East, spent a lot of time in America, spent a lot of time in Europe. But, well, Sabalon, Dubai built on slavery, almost certainly, because the biggest slavers in the world have always been the Arabs, mate. Always. And they're still doing it. So we don't really want to get down that route, or we'll end up in a whole world of pain, won't we? What was it, 700? 700 made the crossing across the Atlantic, and 21 million made the crossing into the Arab countries. Yeah. But these are just figures off the top of my head. So there we go. I'm putting this up again on Sergeant Grumpy. Yesterday's isn't up yet, but it'll get there. It'll get there. sergeantgrumpy.com for the full report and all the references to the research, so you can all have a good look. And remember, do your own research. Never believe a YouTube channel. Never believe an individual. I'll give you pointers, but I'm not making up your mind for you. That's for you to do. You make up your own mind. So that's where we are. Most people have respect for others. Yeah, they do. But people mostly have respect for others in most places. And, you know, I have respect for people that have respect for me. I'm more than happy to give people the opportunity to be nice. If they choose not to, then that then becomes their problem, not mine. But there we go. It's been a great night again. Thank you very much. Some challenging questions in the chat, particularly from Soldier. But again, we know that we have differing viewpoints, but as adults, we should be able to coexist and still be able to talk to each other, even though we do have differing viewpoints. And that's where sometimes these conversations are a lot easier than ones we have on Twitter, where people fly off the handle really quickly and don't get the gist of what's actually being said. Now, Shalini's not an Arab. That is not the case. So remember, make your own mind up. Don't believe anyone. Trust no one. And as always, it's been great for you.